What up guys, theshadowlord here, and today I wanted to do a brand new guide video for you guys. I wanted to make a short guide of some of the stuff you should be aware when tackling the Cathedral of the Endless Night, I believe is how you pronounce the dungeon. Apologies if I pronounce any of the boss names incorrectly, because I do find these videos sometimes what challenging with having dyslexia and such like that. But let's jump straight into the guide. So, to be able to enter this dungeon, you are going to have to have done an amount of the Broken Shore quests. I'll put the specific ones that you need to actually have done on screen now for you guys. The clips you will be seeing in this video are of the dungeon on Mythic difficulty, should I say. So we are going to be looking at the Mythic mechanics. I'll be making sure to tell you guys specifically about what those Mythic mechanics are. So we're going to first be looking at the trash before the first boss. The first things you're going to want to be worrying about on the first bits of trash is going to be the Fell Guard Destroyers that are going to cast an ability called Shadow Wall, which is going to need to be kicked, or the mobs are going to have to be dragged out of it by the tank to remove the effect from them. The next main thing you're going to be wanting to look at when it comes to the trash is going to be the Wrathguard Invaders, as they have a few things to look out for. If you're a tank, you are going to mainly want to look out for the Fell Strike. That will basically send a line of fire between the Wrathguard and the tank. You're also going to need to kick the Hellblaze Soulmenders, as they're going to be healing or having an AoE heal if the cast is allowed to get off. The final thing is an AoE bubble that is going to be placed on the ground. Now, you want to be able to move the mobs out of this green bubble. However, if your healer is able to deal with the ticking damage which this bubble deals, you will be able to have your casting DPS and some of your melee DPS able to stand inside this bubble and have their haste increased by 50%. The tank should make sure that they are not knocked into other trash packs or off the balcony completely whenever a dead wing or dead wings cast Shadow Strike. Immediately as you enter the room, you're going to be able to see the first mini-boss. Now, we personally didn't pull this, and I'd recommend if you are not going for mob count in Mythic Plus, then you try your best to actually avoid this, but I will go over the abilities just the same. Basically, in most cases, you are going to want to just avoid where this mini-boss is going to be in front of him, so the tank should be trying to face them away from the main group, because when the mini-boss casts Shadow Wave, this is going to deal a large amount in a frontal cone and will also leave purple goo on the floor that will deal ticking damage to you if you're standing in it. With that being said, we're going to move on to the second level of the Cathedral. You're going to need to watch out for the Vine Walkers. Their main two abilities are going to be Lumbering Crash, which will deal a knockback to players and deal AoE damage to the group. So merely move away when they are casting this to avoid being knocked back. You're also going to need to be looking out for Vine Roots, which will place a zone under two ranged players. These zones will then actively stunning the players for 6 seconds if you are standing inside them, so do your best to avoid this. We're then going to move on to the first boss, who is going to, throughout this boss, this is moderately of a damage kind of race, because what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to kill the boss before your debuff stats get too high for your healer not to actually be able to deal with. The boss is also going to cast Timber Smash on the tank, which will deal a large amount of physical damage to the tank and knocking them into the sky. The boss is going to summon multiple adds at the back of the room that will fixate on some random players. You are able to slow these adds. Please note that you are unable to stun them. You're going to want to kill these off as fast as possible, because if they reach a player, they will deal a large amount of explosion damage to any nearby players. On Mythic only, there is also going to be Something that spawns within melee range that if not killed, you will take ticking damage, which will, if you're standing in it. So basically avoid that. Most of the ads between the first and the second boss are not that hard to deal with. The only ones I'm going to be, well, the only one I'm going to be talking about is the small mini-boss that you are actually going to deal with. This mini-boss is going to cast a glare, which is basically going to require you to face your character so it's looking away from the mob or the mini-boss itself, so you do not take the damage or get stunned for 6 seconds. Once the mini-boss dies, be careful where you kill it, because it will also spawn the second boss on top of it. The boss will basically jump down on top of where the mini-boss dies. The next boss is going to be... There's going to be a couple of things you need to mainly look out for during this fight. There's going to be a big AoE that he's going to cast on the ground around him within 15 yards of the boss. This will do lethal damage to anyone standing within that 15 yards, and it will also do AoE damage. The next thing you're going to be wanting to look out for is when he throws his weapon to the outside of the room. His weapon from this point forward will be spinning around the room in a tornado, dealing lethal damage to anyone who it actually hits. So make sure you're in the inner circle of the room. The main thing the other main ability you're going to want to look out for during this boss is going to be his charge, which will will randomly mark a player, and then within 7 seconds after that, that player will be charged, and the mark, basically the marked player will want to be behind the bookcase, so it is between, so the player is between the boss, and there is a bookcase between the boss and the player that is being charged. On Mythic only, once the bookcase has been destroyed by the charge, 2 books will spawn. These do separate little abilities. If you want any details on these, I'll make sure to link the Wowhead article in the description down below. Just make sure to DPS these down before you go back to killing the boss. After the boss dies, the room or the door to the north will open, and you will be able to go through in towards the third boss. Not a lot of the ads until you get to the mini boss are actually going to be much of a problem, so you just tank and spank these all the way up to the mini boss itself. Once you get to the last mini boss of this instance, then you're going to see 3 main mobs. There's going to be 1 orb caster that is going to cast 2 main abilities that we'll go over in a moment, and also there's going to be a fell enforcer. So you're going to want to kill the orb caster first, because it's going to cast a fell blaze orb that will spawn an orb that will travel slowly in a straight line, dealing a large amount of damage to anyone in its path. So make sure to do your best to avoid this. The orb caster will also cast burning stance at the tank. This will place a debuff on anyone within 5 yards of the tank and will root them and reduce their haste by 25%, dealing tick damage to them over 5 seconds. So do your best not to stand anywhere, within 5 yards of the tank when this is being cast. You will then want to kill the enforcer. However, you do not want to stand in front of the enforcer, as the enforcer will basically have a shockwave that is going to deal damage to the tank. The tank should do his best to avoid, he or she's best to avoid positioning the enforcer in such a way where it's not going to be easily hit the other melee. After the orb caster and the enforcer are dead, you are going to want to kill the mini-boss herself. She is mainly going to vanish and appear behind a random player in the group. The player will then have to move, because if they are still standing within front of her, they're going to get hit by the Venom Storm, which is going to deal a large amount of damage, and also will leave pools on the ground that, if stood in, will reduce the movement speed of the player, and also the haste of that player by 50%. So do your best to avoid these. The mini-boss will also call upon some spiders. The tank should just pick these up, and they should be cleaved down. After killing the last mini-boss, you are going to be able to enter the final room where you're going to be fighting the last 2 bosses. You will also be able to place the Aegis of Agrimar in the middle of this room. This is going to be important because you're going to need it to live the one shot on the next boss. When the boss casts Chaos Energy, everyone in the group with it has 5 seconds to move into the middle of the room where the Aegis of Agrimar are. If you don't do this and you are not a tank, you will probably die as it deals a heavy amount of damage. The boss is also going to cast Fell Soul Cleave towards the tank. After a short cast, it will deal a large amount of fire damage in a frontal cone. If this hits the Aegis, the Aegis itself will lose 50% power, meaning you are less likely to live the soon to continue to be the previous one shot, which I just went over. So the tank should try and sidestep this and try and position it in such a way where it's not going to hit the Aegis. At 90 and 50%, the boss is going to spawn 2 adds. They are going to be Fell Portal Guardians. All DPS should change off the boss and kill these Guardians as fast as possible. The longer the Guardians live, the more adds you'll have to deal with. On normal and heroic difficulties, at 90%, you will only get Hellblaze Imps spawn, which can just be killed quickly after the Guardians have died. At 50%, you'll also get Hellblaze Fell Guards that will spawn instead of the Imps. The Fell Guards will do a frontal shockwave that will deal damage to all players within 10 yards of a frontal cone in front of the Fell Guard. So when the tank is tanking them, try and tank them in such a way where it's going to be easy for your melee to avoid that frontal cone. On Mythic only, the mobs that are actually spawned by the Fell Portal Guardians are changed a bit. Once the Fell Portal Guardians have been spawned, they're going to start a 20-second cast. If this cast finishes, a Searing Overlord will be spawned. This will need to be killed after the Guardians as fast as possible. At 50%, the boss will spawn 2 more Guardians. However, the Guardians will spawn Hellblaze Mistresses instead of the Fell Guards. The Mistresses will be needed to deal with in a similar way that the Fell Guards would have been. However, the Mistresses are going to cast an ability called Shadow Sweep, which will deal damage and knock back anyone within melee range of them. So make sure your melee DPS move out of melee range whenever they are casting it. Be aware that you can have more than one of these at once, so make sure you check both adds. But if you kill the Portal Guardians fast enough, you won't actually have this issue. Between the 3rd and the 4th boss, you are going to have to kill some bats, but that shouldn't take too long. Now, before you start the last boss, you're going to need to make sure that your tank has picked up the Aegis, because you're going to need this during phase 2. The boss has 2 main phases that he will be cycling between until he is defeated. One of the first things you should be aware of is the swarm that he is going to be casted in a frontal cone, dealing damage and leaving some shadow pools on the ground. It's mainly targeted on the tank, so the tank should do his best to face the boss against a wall or taking up as little room as possible. He is also going to cast an ability which applies a debuff to everyone in the group, so make sure to spread between 5 and 10 yards apart of each other to not take any extra damage or have another dot stack. You will also, on Mythic, have to deal with another debuff, which is basically going to apply to everyone who isn't a tank in the group. This debuff will then, when it fades, it will drop a big green circle on the ground, which after a couple of seconds will spawn a large pillar that will erupt out of the ground, dealing a large amount of damage if you're within the circle. So if you have this debuff, then make sure to move it to the edge of the room and then do not stand in the circle. After roughly 40 seconds into the fight, the boss will be at 100 energy. This means we will then transition into phase 2. During this phase, you'll not be able to damage the boss itself. The tank is going to need to use the Aegis to shield Illidan, as Illidan will be gaining energy slowly, and once Illidan gains 100% energy, he will return you to the first phase. Throughout this phase, shades of the boss are going to cast Shadow Blast. If any of the Shadow Blasts reach Illidan, it will stop him from gaining energy for a short period of time. During this phase, you're going to want to save or use any available big damage cooldowns, such as Metamorphosis or Nemesis for a Demon Hunter, and also you're going to want to pop your Heroism. As this phase goes on, there will be a ramping, ticking debuff that everyone in the group is going to be getting. So the longer you're in this phase, the more damage you'll take, and eventually your healer will not be able to out-heal the damage that you're taking, and you will end up wiping. Also, only when you're fighting, having this fight on Mythic, during the second phase, you will also be getting bombed by some of the Fellbats that will fly in through the window. Do your best to avoid the green markings on the floor that will show where the Fellbats are actually going to be dropping their bombs. Rinse and repeat these 2 phases, and you will actually then end up killing the boss and completing the dungeon. So I hope you guys did enjoy this little guide video. Apologies if I did mispronounce anything or I sound a little bit off. It's been a little bit since I did one of these guide videos. But I hope you guys did enjoy it, and I hope you guys it did help you out a lot. I do spend a lot of time writing the scripts for these videos and making sure that the information I'm telling you is correct, and I'm going to do my best to actually produce this one as well as I possibly can. So if you think I did a good job and you enjoyed the video and it helped you out, then make sure to leave it with a like, and feel free to share it with some guildies or any of your friends that will be taking on this dungeon. And I hope you guys enjoy 7.2 as much as I have been, and we're going to be doing a lot more 7.2 videos in the coming weeks. So if you are interested in any more content like that, then feel free to be subscribed to the channel. And if you would like to leave me any constructive criticism in the comment section down below, or just let me know what you thought of this video, or etc like that, then feel free. I'll be sure to get back to you when I can. Well, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Farewell.